Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Balance Breakdown. Funnily enough, my name is not Ian O'Neill. Ian is away conquering many a globe at the moment, and so is unable to be here. And so I drafted in our friend, our pal, the man himself, who has adeptly, bless his heart, look at him, color coordinated with the backdrop. That's professionalism, ladies and gentlemen. That is professionalism. I have drafted in the one, the only, Mr. Spencer Kyte. Spencer, how's it going?
Doing well, Chef. How are you?
I am spiffing. Thank you. So we'll jump right in. Going in, you and I had sort of talked offline about maybe a little bit of apprehension for this card, a little bit of maybe fatigue, maybe a little bit of what's the right word that I'm fishing for here? Maybe just a little bit of a downturn of feeling towards this card. On paper, I think it's obvious to see why we felt like that. Not a ton of divisional relevance across the card. Lots of sort of odd matchmaking, but in reality, on the night, how it turned out, obviously I didn't watch it live, but I thought it was all right. What did you think?
Yeah, so part of the apprehension going in is it's a lot of athletes coming off setbacks. There's a bunch of relative newcomers to the promotion and people with limited experience. And so, going in, it's not going to have the gravitational pull of some of these bigger cards. And when you get a bunch of athletes that are all coming off losses and it's a little bit of who can get back into the win column, that doesn't necessarily carry the level of excitement that ascending fighters meeting tends to carry. That being said, there were some good prospects on here. There were some good fights, some interesting moments, and it turned out to be a pretty good show overall. We had a whole bunch of decisions again on the prelims, which carried over from UFC 302, which had everybody on social media doing the new gloves and here we go again and haven't had a finish since. And then the main card was like, settle down, folks. Quiet up. Just sit back and enjoy the fights. Here's a bunch of knockout of the year contenders. So all in all, a pretty reasonable afternoon, evening of fights as far as I'm concerned. And a couple of athletes that really broke out and had performances that if they don't still have us talking later in the week, at least had us talking night of and sort of first couple days, put them fresh in your mind, put them on your radar going forward.
You mentioned somebody that had sort of a breakout performances or performances that we should at least talk about throughout this week. And one of those to me was half Nassourdine Imamov. And I guess I'll get to why I mean that in a moment. But main event, big name in Jared Cannonier, big spot in Louisville, KFC Center.
KFC Yum Center.
Correct. Yeah, sorry, correct. You're absolutely right.
Yum exclamation point center.
Oh, and sorry, I have done you a disservice. On the setup last week, what we had discussed was our KFC order. And obviously, although the card is passed, I apologize to the people listening and watching. It is obviously imperative of me. So Spencer, what's the KFC order?
The KFC order is FKFC. I'm going to Popeyes because Popeyes is better. So when you're going fried chicken, go to the best possible fried chicken. If we're talking chain. Now, I don't need people shouting at me that chain store fried chicken isn't the same as. If I can get home cooked fried chicken, win every time. You would agree, I'm sure. But if you're going chain, I'm going Popeyes, and I'm going a 2-piece with mashed potatoes and a biscuit.
So as usual, you are a charlatan. You don't play the fucking game, but that's fine. That's a good answer regardless. I'll just give my very quick thoughts. I was shocked at the game plan of Jared Cannonier here. Going in, I thought that what we would likely see is Imavov initiating a little bit more of the grappling exchanges, Cannonier using some of the solid takedown defense we have seen in his fights, some of the solid disengaging, some of the solid tie work, and it effectively turned into a kickboxing match that I expected Cannonier to be able to find spots in that he could land the more impactful damage. And on the night, it turned out to be effectively the exact opposite, which was Cannonier initiated far more of the grappling sequences. I think what was evident to me was how physically imposing Jared Cannonier was in those spots, because skill for skill, I don't think I'm wrong in saying that Imavov is likely the more seasoned grappler, but he had a real tough time in those cage exchanges, in those wall exchanges, to reverse the position, find meaningful underhooks, move his hips out to the side. And I think that just speaks to the sort of the physicality and the strength and the size of Jared Cannonier. Obviously, Jared Cannonier clearly has lots of skills in those areas too, but this is not something that we generally see from Imavov. I also found that Imavov, when he did find his range and he did get past that Cannonier jab, was throwing really snappy, really hurtful, really impactful shots. And I think it sort of speaks to me, a pretty crazy game plan from Jared Cannonier, one that I felt is taxing for a man as well muscled as his gas tank. But then Imavov, on the flip side, showed me some things that I was genuinely impressed with. What did you have going in, and what did you have coming out?
So I had a lot of the same thoughts you did going in. I spoke with Jared Cannonier before the fight. We talked about the Marvin Vettori matchup, where pace and volume were the focus coming out of the Israel Adesanya fight. He didn't get to necessarily do it the way that he wanted to against Sean Strickland, who was very defensively responsible, at least in terms of making it really difficult for you to land and build volume and build sort of momentum. That wasn't the case against Marvin Vettori. He goes out, he puts up the most significant strikes in a UFC middleweight fight of all time, 241, I believe, and puts it on him. That was his, from speaking to him, that was his intention here. Now, I wonder if part of that changes when you get in there. And as you said, we're seeing a little more snap. We're seeing better striking and better defense from Nassourdine Imamov in terms of the range exchanges. And then Cannonier says, okay, we can use some of that physicality. You'll always have to remember with Jared Cannonier, used to compete at heavyweight, used to fight at light heavyweight. Even though he has shrunk down, he is still a big, strong, physical human being. And so I understand the decision to get into those clinch situations, but I do wonder, as you said, is that a part of what sort of taxed the system? Now, I wouldn't say that he was fading or he looked fatigued at any point, but it's just difficult, right? When you're carrying that kind of muscle, when you're working with a guy the size of Imavov, I've been in the same room with him. He is a big, big boy. He's not Jared Cannonier physical thickness, but he is a big, long, he understands leverage. He understands how to use all of his weapons and all of his tools to sort of keep himself safe and make you work. And Jared Cannonier had to work. And I wonder if some of that effort wasn't feeling as fruitful as he would have liked. And then we just saw kind of moments of the best Imavov we've seen thus far. And then we had the ending the way that we had the ending. And that makes it frustrating.
Yeah, we'll get to the ending because I don't really have a huge problem with it. But I think for Cannonier, at least the question I had after sort of the second round was the striking wasn't working in terms of the more impactful strikes were being landed by Imavov. The jab of Cannonier was lovely, really, really nice, really, really, really crisp, really clean. But he wasn't then landing the two. He wasn't landing the check left hook 3. He wasn't landing the big shot that is going to force Imavov back. And so, you know, if you want to, as you've said, to initiate the grappling and push Imavov against the fence and maybe try and drain Imavov's gas tank a little bit, fine. But you're sort of playing into the arena with which Imavov is the most comfortable. Now, of course, I don't think he's as comfortable being the nail in the grappling situations, but he'll have been in those situations so often that the grappling cardio, if you will, is probably largely much more tested than Jared Cannonier's. Equally, then there wasn't enough for me impetus on actually finding the takedown. He hit that lovely foot sweep in the first round. And okay, Imavov did a great job at getting back to his feet and getting back into the clinch. But I didn't then see enough impetus to try to repeat those sorts of situations. I didn't see enough knees up the middle. I didn't see enough foot stomps. You know, I love a foot stomp. I didn't see enough elbows on the break. I just didn't see enough to really give Jared Cannonier the fruits of his labor for putting Imavov in that situation. It just felt like Imavov was able to hang out, mind his P's and Q's, not get taken down too easily with anything super silly, and then circle his way out and land back with the immediately impactful striking. And it just felt like an odd game plan where Cannonier wasn't willing to maybe sit in the pocket with Imavov and try to land a big shot. When he was unable to find the secondary shot after the jab and Imavov landed, Cannonier was like, oh, okay, cool, that hurt. That wasn't nice to take, so I'm going to close the distance and push him against the fence, but then just not do enough when he pushed him against the fence. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, just an odd game plan all around. But I completely agree with you that Imavov looked sharp, the gas tank looked good. The real thing that I was looking for with Imavov was the mentality. Was he going to be able to stay calm? Was he going to be able to, between rounds, not get too amped up, not get too frustrated if things weren't going perfectly his way, not get too high if things were going his way, and able to keep a level playing field? And I was very impressed with all of those elements from Nassourdine Imamov.
It almost felt to me in watching that fight that Jared Cannonier wasn't quite satisfied just doing the simple things that are going to pile up and pile up and pile up. As you said, the jab was great. He landed some good low kicks early. If that's working and you're not landing that too, you're not finding a home for the check hook, as you mentioned, stick the jab. We've seen people win by just pumping jabs and low kicks. And Imavov stands there in both stances. He will switch stances, but that lead leg is usually rooted and you can get after him. And even if you do go into that clinch, knees to the midsection, knees to the thighs, short elbows, find spots to land effectively. That has been a thing you and I speak about offline all the time. It is a thing I tweet about every single event night now, where it's like, we just went through 30 seconds and you didn't throw anything. You can't do that. You have to be doing damage. You have to be being effective. And it felt a little bit like there was a impetus to do more than just the basics. And sometimes the basics are enough. This was a competitive fight. There was no point prior to sort of the fourth round where it really got one-sided or it got dicey for either man. So if the jab is working and the low kicks are working and you are able to back him into the fence and control him there, use those moments and build on those. Don't keep looking for that big shot. Don't keep trying to create something that hasn't been there. Go with what you're getting and be effective. And on the other side, I feel like Imavov really did that. He kind of just looked at the whole fight and was like, wrestling isn't going to work. This guy's a brute. So let me get into space. Let me use my length. Let me use my range. Let me find my timing and just land the stuff that's effective. There was nothing flashy. There was nothing big and extraordinary. It was a good jab. It was good crosses. It was some low kicks. It was some body kicks that we've seen from him routinely. It was effectiveness in the clinch in terms of minimizing damage and getting himself back into space. And then when the moments presented themselves, he landed some big shots. And that's what Cannonier couldn't do. And as simplistic as it sounds, that's always often the difference in fights is those small little moments. Cannonier couldn't find it. Imavov did. And here we are.
Agreed. And like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on the finish. My specific opinion is Jared was hurt. He turned his back 3 times. And as he turned to face Imavov, yes, okay, he wasn't collapsed, limpless, lifeless on the floor, but he took another big shot and he wasn't defending intelligently. Do we see those fights allowed to go a little further sometimes? Yes. Do I think that's the right answer? I think it's up to the referee's discretion. Every single time I see something like this, I sort of think back to what Mark Goddard says, and he says, I always just try and look in the fighter's eyes. The eyes will tell you. If the fighter's eyes are fixed and focused, I will allow the fight to continue. If I do not feel like they're fixed and focused and they're not intelligently defending themselves, I will call the fight. And immediately after, when Jason Herzog ran towards guided Jared Cannonier towards his corner were obviously disputing the stoppage, and Herzog pointed to the eyes and said he wasn't there. Like, he was not there. And so I am more than happy to see fighters not catapulted to the canvas with their eyes rolling back. And more often than not, it means that Jared Cannonier is going to be able to return to action far quicker. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, that's my thing as well. And as always afterwards, I talked about, we're always looking for those Goldilocks moments where we want it to be just right. I'm going to take early rather than late every single day and twice on Sundays. And I am always going to side with and give the benefit of the doubt to the gold standard in North America, Jason Herzog, one of the 2 or 3 best officials in this entire sport. Was it maybe a little premature? Sure, you can make the case. You can also make the case, as you just did, that there's several points in there where you're like, okay, this is getting dicey. He had to hold himself up against the fence on one of those retreats. He fully turns and runs away and kind of slides against the fence. That is a sign that you are in bad shape. And so while I understand everybody saying, well, he wasn't down and he was still on his feet, do we need to see people constantly flatlined in order to be satisfied with this? Like, this is the part that's starting to get tough for me, covering this sport and consuming this sport or consuming social media while enjoying this sport, is that it feels to me like the bloodlust is getting a little bit too much. And as you said, this overall benefits Jared Cannonier. Sure, he's frustrated. Sure, he's on the MMA Hour today talking about, I feel like it got taken from me. Fully understand it. You're allowed to be upset. Jason Herzog did what he felt was right. I'm always going to give Jason the benefit of the doubt. He is a fabulous official. We don't need to see people completely out, scary moments on the floor, on the cage, where if that fight goes 10 more seconds and he gets crushed with another right hand and then 2 bad hammer fists on the ground, those same people that are saying this was too early, this is a horrible stoppage, are pillorying Jason Herzog for being too late. So give me early over late any day of the week. Shouts to Jason Herzog for a job well done.
One word answer. Who do you want next for Nassourdine Imamov?
Strickland makes sense. I know they've done it before, but it was short notice. It was up at weight. I mean, I tweeted out the top 3 fights for Paris that I like. I know you said one word answer, but this is me. Give me Cyril Gane and Jailton Almeida, Nassourdine Imamov and Sean Strickland co-main, Benoit Saint-Denis, Rafael Dos Anjos in the 3rd spot. Let's go. Lovely, lovely September in Paris.
Possibly. We'll move on to the co-main event. Hard not to feel good for Dominick Reyes. Long layoff, comes back. Dustin Jacoby. Not the most difficult matchup. Like, it's certainly a matchup whereby Dom Reyes is in his wheelhouse, right? But he still had to go out there. He still had to do it, right? He still had to do the things. Still had to go and get punched in the face again. Still had to go and, battle the insecurities that come after you've been out for that period of time. And he looked good, managed the range well, dealt with Jacoby well, and landed big shots and put Dustin Jacoby away. You're shaking your head. Go on.
Well, this is just going to be that point where I'm the guy that everybody doesn't want to hear from, because the reactions to these types of moments, and yes, it's a great moment for him in terms of 3 or 4 consecutive losses, 3 straight finishes. He goes out, he gets his first victory since 2019. Those are all great things. I am happy for him. You could see the emotion and what it meant to him. It doesn't change much for me. This doesn't suddenly make me go, Dom Reyes is back, guys. Look out, light heavyweight division. He's 34 years old, maybe?
Not too old for light heavyweight.
34, be 35 on Boxing Day. You say not too old for light heavyweight, but like there were 3 brutal knockouts in there.
Sure.
And everybody that is ahead of him in the division has the ability to concuss him badly. And so I'm happy to see him get a victory. By no means am I saying like be done, don't ever want to see him again, but like let's just temper the Dom Reyes is back. Because, and I don't say this as like, as you said, Dustin Jacoby is a good fighter. He is a solid member of this group. He is not one of these dudes that is in the top 10. He is not one of these dudes that is chasing a championship. And so let's see what Dominick Reyes looks like, provided he can return in the next 6 months fully healthy, which has been an issue for him for the last several years, and get in there with one of these people that are chasing a title. Then I'll say, okay, Dom Reyes back if he goes out and does this to one of them. It's a good win. It's a great story in terms of getting that victory that is several years away. And like, it's brutal that this losing streak started with a fight that he won. He won. He beat John Jones. Should have been light heavyweight champion. But I just want to go easy. I feel like we get ahead of ourselves sometimes. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if I agree too much on that, to be honest. I think, and that's because when Dom Reyes was coming back, I wasn't looking at it like here's a title challenger getting a layup to get his name back in. I saw this as this is a fella that's had a really tough run the last 4 years of his fighting career. Now, both inside and outside of the cage, he's managed to make the walk. What does he look like? And he looked like there was still power in his hands. It looked like he was still confident. It looked like when he got the finish, he was obviously super, super, super happy, and that was cool to see. I'm not sure I necessarily had any expectation coming in that we were going to see another run to the title, and we might, right? As you say, he might go out and put it all together and go out and face a top 15, top 5, top 10 guy and look great. Fine. But to me, this was about, can he get in there and do it again? Because let's be honest, Dustin Jacoby is the Alex Morono of light heavyweight division, and there's so much respect I have behind that statement. But you have to go out and beat that guy, right? You absolutely
100%,
right, and he did
in a vacuum. Taken Saturday night in Louisville, Kentucky. This is awesome. This is great to see. All of what you said, 100%. For me, it is just let's be careful going forward with what we project, with what we hope, and what we expect.
What's the name?
This is where it gets hard. I mean, Anthony Smith, coming off a win, beat an up-and-comer, but also somebody that we have some questions about still. Let's see.
It's a great fight.
That feels like a reasonable pairing.
I agree. Okay. A bit of a mad fight in the next one. Bit of a fucking mad fight. Raul Rosas Jr. comes out, tries to touch hands, gets expletively flamed. Then Ricky Tercios does a load of kicking, and Raul Rosas Jr. has to sort of compose himself a little piece, and then gets his back taken, almost gets finished, ends up taking Ricky Tercios' back, almost finishes him, and then says, oh, I'm just a fucking way better grappler than this fella, and so I'm just gonna clean him, and so did. I thought it was then quite a beautiful exchange at the end where Raul Rosas Jr. desperately wanted to go and shake Tercios' hand and sort of make amends for whatever the fuck was going on pre the fight. Tercios obviously didn't seem too enthusiastic about that for seemingly obvious reasons. But I think this was a step up for Raul Rosas Jr. I think immediately, again, he started slowly, and that's something that really, really, really needs to be fixed. I think that his overarching top control is fantastic. I need to see a little bit more damage, but when he gets to the back, he's a killer. Like, he knows what he's doing. He knows how to keep a fighter there. He knows how to escape that position. Obviously, we saw that too this fight. But when he has his partner in that position, in back control, either with a body lock or just two hooks, he is very, very, very good in the hand fight, in ensuring that Ricky Turcios is controlled for almost all of the time. And then when we eventually got to the double overhook choking situations, it was pretty impressive. What did you think?
So I was impressed with his ability to compose himself, his ability to just kind of stay in it and not kind of panic and exhaust himself, as we saw in the Christian Rodriguez fight, where he suffered his first and only loss to date. I agree with you about his ability on the ground and recognizing, oh, I'm a way better grappler than this dude. Let me just get into my bag here and get this over with. I think this was a needed step forward. I'm glad he passed this test. You and I talk about these things all the time, the need to constantly be testing, especially young, inexperienced fighters. He's another one of these people for me where it's like, this is great, but let's just remember the things that we need to remember. Primarily, he is a 19-year-old. So let's just continue to go slow. Let's not screw this up and ruin this kid's development and progress by hustling him in there too deep, too soon, anything like that. September at the Sphere will most likely be when we see him again, which is great. He gets a couple months to continue working, continue developing. And I just hope it's somebody in this same line. Ricky Turcios showed some things in that first round that were important for me to see in that fight out of Rosas Jr. Ricky Turcios, when he wants to be, is, to use one of your phrases, a mad bastard that can scramble for days. And he did. And it forced Rosas Jr. to reset and adjust and work with him and flow through and figure out how to get to his spots. Those are important lessons, especially to be learning at 19 at this level, to then go out in the second and do what he did to get the finish. This is a very good performance. But let's just keep taking these little baby steps and putting a whole lot of time into training, development, building, and not just trying to chase our way up the ladder as quick as possible.
I agree. I think, there are Edmund Shabazians, there are Mohamed Makayevs, and there are Tatsuto Tairas, and there are Raul Rosas Jr.'s, right? And I think that it is really important to make sure that we don't, as you say, we don't create another Edmund Shabazian, another Chase Hooper, another whatever, where we have a potential of a really good fighter.
Well, I like that you mentioned Chase there, because he's a guy for me that you look at the way things started, and it was win one, lose one, win one, lose one. And he's getting put into his second fight was Alex Caceres, who had like 97 UFC fights to Chase his one. Now that he's grown into his body and isn't a pipe cleaner anymore, and he's moved up to lightweight, we're seeing the skills that were always there and the innate talents and abilities that were always there. He's just growing into being a man. Raul Rosas Jr. is going to go through those same things. And I wanted to mention, the broadcast team really did a good job pointing out in the main event that Imavov wasn't somebody that when he arrived, we looked at and went, everybody pay attention. This is the guy. He's just sort of slowly worked his way through and built a little bit here and got a win. And okay, this is a good performance, and kind of step by step up the divisional ladder to where he's now going to be in the top 5. Let's take that same approach with Raul Rosas Jr. He's much younger. Obviously, he's starting further down the ladder than Imavov did, who debuted, I believe, against Phil Haas. So debuted against Jordan Williams and then fought Phil Haas. Let's just take our time with it, use guys like Chase Hooper and Edmund Shabazian as sort of the templates for what not to do, and let him continue to progress. The talent is there. The upside is there. We can all see it. This is a monster of a division with a load of talent that if you're in with the wrong guy, even in that lower third, lower half, you're catching a loss. Because this next matchup, if they do it incorrectly, can be someone like Rinya Nakamura, which is just a nightmare, which is just trouble, right? It's just a problem. That guy's better than you. It could be, hey, Javid Basharat is coming off a loss. I don't know that Raul Rosas Jr. needs those problems today. So let's find people that make sense.
I'm with you. We'll move on to Bruno Ferreira. And again, what was a bit of a fucking mad fight, to be honest. It was a come behind performance ending in a knockout of the year contender. Bruno Ferreira knows nothing more than blowing everything he possibly has in the first round. His only entrance into the second round resulted in a loss. These things happen in MMA. I was impressed with Bruno Ferreira's ability to just keep going, frankly, and just the belief that he's going to find the way and find the chink in the armor of Dustin Stolfus, who, for the most part, looked pretty good, to be honest. He looked pretty good. He was controlling the grappling exchanges. His straight punches were working quite well. He forced Bruno Ferreira behind the tram lines for significant periods of the early portions of that fight. And then Bruno Ferreira said, yeah, all this is cool and stuff. Like, it's cool that you're, doing tactical things and trying to win the fight and all that. But I'm going to hit you now and it's going to really hurt. And then I'm going to eventually spinning back elbow you into the stratosphere. And it was just a bit mad, wasn't it, really? I think the thing that impressed me the most, if we were to go from a technical perspective, is he landed 2 shovel hooks to the body. And then as he leant for that spinning elbow, Stolfus immediately thought, oh, he's going to dig into a right liver punch here. Obviously, that's the setup. The setup then is that he spins, throws the spinning elbow, and boy, oh boy, does he put Dustin Stolfus away. I mean, I don't think it probably will win knockout of the year. I think there probably will be some other very, very, very strong candidates, but it's up there for sure.
That race is decided. Max Holloway has already earned that title. Nothing. And if anything beats that, I said this after Vinicius Oliveira landed his perfect flying knee in March against Bernardo Sopai. If anything tops this as knockout of the year, it means we've had a crazy finish. Then Max Holloway did Max Holloway things. Let's go right here, puts out Justin Gaethje. That's number 1. This is in the running, though. This makes the definitely top 10, might make the podium at the halfway point. We'll find out at the end of the month.
We will indeed. We will scoot along to what was what do we even talk about? Zach Reese versus Julian Marquez. I mean, look, I will chuck it over to you shortly, but Julian Marquez is not UFC caliber anymore, I don't think. At least not UFC caliber in the way that we wanted him to be, I think, at the start of his career. But Zach Reese impressed me. Footwork was good. He looked absolutely ginormous in there. Looked like every shot landed with crisp, mean intentions. And the finish itself was very, very pretty. Very, very, very pretty. What did you think of 20 seconds worth of work?
Finish was gorgeous. And for Julian Marquez to pop up when Dan Miragliotta stopped the fight and be like, hey, man, your eyes closed, your head was down as you fell back. Hitting the canvas woke you back up. Now, I understand nobody wants to acknowledge, hey, I was out. Everybody wants the opportunity to fight. And for a guy like Julian Marquez, who has gone through many, many years of injuries and layoffs and delays, there's got to be nothing worse than putting in however many weeks and months he put in, move into the lab to train in Arizona, all of that to get 20 seconds and to land one shot. It's one of the things I try to talk about when I talk to fighters of like, can you just explain to me how soul crushing that is to like, not to bring up miserable moments of your life, but can you explain? It's got to be just devastating. But he was out, and Zach Reese hammered him with that uppercut, and it was beautiful. It was well set up because he smashed that body kick home and got Julian Marquez thinking about, I got to protect down here because he's going to cut, and it just split the guard. Beautiful shot. Great performance. I was at his debut in Austin when he got slammed into oblivion by Cody Brundage because he was just holding on to a triangle for a little bit too long. He's another one of these guys that is still a question mark to me. It's still just like, okay, we're through 2 fights. I think he got maybe 2 minutes of cage time total combined between 2 fights. You haven't been out of the first round ever in your career. So let's just see. Let's get you in there again. Let's do this in another 3 months. Another test, another guy in the same sort of position. And each time out, we'll just keep testing hypotheses. We'll just keep running experiments to see what you present. Because size-wise, length-wise, there are some pluses. Definitely. Obviously, nose for a finish, good finishing instincts. So let's just keep seeing it. I wasn't overly impressed with him coming off of Contender Series. Obviously, the fight in his debut doesn't go the way that you want it to go, and you get slammed into oblivion. These things happen. So let's just see. Let's keep. It's one of those fights. He is one of those fighters, and it's a thing that I'm thinking about more and more as I continue to watch every single week. We have to continue to just give people time. We can't make judgments on 1 fight, 2 fight. To me, even 4 fights is starting to get a little tough to make full-on calls because those first couple are usually just testing the water, just seeing, do you even belong here? And okay, when we find out that you belong here, then we start figuring out where you fit. So we're a ways away from understanding where this guy fits, but let's just keep seeing, because so far, entertaining, win or lose, that's what I want to see.
Do you think, just as a slight off track, do you think that the increasing number of fights we need to pencil somebody's ceiling in is a function of inflated rosters? Is it a function that we have less time to analyze the fighters because the schedule's so heavy? Is it because the general level of each division is rising so rapidly? Is it because these fighters are, you know, the UFC is such a massive thing for them, and so it takes them a little bit of time to sort of settle into the promotion? What do you think the reason is for that?
I think it's all of those things. If we were making a pie chart, all of those things are represented. I think you and I have spoken at length about the overall skill level and talent level of athletes today is higher than it's ever been. But I also think that the gaps between sort of the classes within a weight class are wider than they've been in some time. The lower third of a division is so much further behind the middle third than they used to be. And the middle third is so much further behind the upper third. And then in that championship group in most weight classes, that group is differentiated by a gap as well. And so I think it becomes more difficult to judge because for a lot of these athletes, especially the people coming in through the Contender Series or with limited amount of experience on the regional circuit, you just don't know until you see them in there against somebody that you feel comfortable kind of measuring them against and drawing a conclusion against. I want to see them in there with somebody that has 5, 6, 7 UFC appearances, and I know their level, and I understand. You mentioned Alex Morono earlier, right? One of those ecosystem fighters that I just have a good sense of what it means to beat this person. Julian Marquez isn't that person. He's unfortunately been mired with injuries and stuck on the sidelines more than he's competed. So it's hard to say, well, this just shows that he's here. Now, the next couple fights are probably going to be able to do that. I think one of the other things that you didn't mention in there is just the number of promotions, and this is ultimately a good thing for the sport, but it's a difficult thing in terms of development and scouting athletes as they move to these promotions. Because there are so many now that are thriving and grabbing fighters and holding events every single weekend, we have a litany of events to choose from. It means you're getting less time on your way to, whether it's the UFC or PFL or KSW, Octagon, Cage Warriors, whoever. You're hitting that point much earlier than you used to, where you're now fighting for titles in your 4th, 5th, 6th fight on the regional circuit and then reaching the UFC. That used to be unheard of. You used to have to go through 3 or 4 people in Cage Warriors and get good wins over known commodities in Cage Warriors. Some of those tenured Cage Warriors guys before you fought for the title. And then we knew who you were and we understood what that level was. And then you came to the UFC and started again in the UFC. Ian Machado Gary, a perfect example, right? Fights Rostam Akhman. We know what that win means. Fights Jack Grant. We know what that win means. Then he comes to the UFC and it's Jordan Williams, Darian Weeks. I believe there was a Gabe Green in there, maybe.
Gabe Green was.
Yeah. Like it was just, you got to keep proving it. That's gone away a little bit in the last 2 years. And so it's just getting all of those things you mentioned. That pie chart is full of 6 or 8 factors. And we have to just keep that in mind as we're trying to figure some of these guys out.
I agree. A very important one, definitely very important, but a very impressive too, welterweight performance from Sunihele Poriano. I thought that...
I like that you just flipped that there. Sunihele Poriano.
His name. I apologize. I thought this was going to be a stand-up banger. And I think in those early sort of minute and a half, it could have been that. And then very, very quickly, he realized that there was a discrepancy in skill in the grappling and just destroyed Baeza. Just absolutely destroyed him. Maybe not from a, just 10-8s across the board. I don't mean destroyed in that way, but there was no room for Baeza. There was no getting up. There was no getting out. And the moment that there was any glimmer of hope, Punahele Soriano just blew that candle out immediately, licked his fingers, grabbed the candle, and just punched him in the face with it. Like, just really, really, really solid grappling, solid fight IQ. I was really impressed. Any quick thoughts?
Super impressed. Know Puna a little bit. Very happy for him to get this victory. It feels like he was a guy, and I'll reach out and ask him about this because he'll give me an honest answer. It feels like a guy that fell in love with his hands a little bit, right? He's a D3 wrestler. Warburton College, good wrestler. Started knocking fools out, throwing those lefts, putting guys to sleep. Man, that's way more fun than wrestling and being exhausted. Plus, he was a tweener. He was a little undersized at middleweight, dealt with that, decided to make the move down and said, wait a minute, let me use this thing that I haven't been using. It was surprising to me how dominant he was. Miguel Baeza is a good grappler. He's a good jiu-jitsu fighter, but he had nothing for him in this fight. I'm very curious to talk to Miguel again and find out sort of, Body, this was his first fight back in 2 years. He spoke to me before the fight about dealing with some illnesses and some injuries. Love to know what some of that stuff is. He was unwilling to disclose ahead of time. I wonder if some of that factors in, but just a great performance from Puna. And you like to see a guy like that is a good dude, that has been working hard, having some unfortunate luck at middleweight, come down, have a great performance, set himself up for something bigger and better in the second half of the year.
Indeed. So I'll just run through the prelim fights as we're ticking on with time. Ludovic Klein, Togo Moises, Carlos Prates, Charles Radke, Brad Katona, Jesse Butler, Montana De La Rosa, Andrea Lee, Daniel Marcos, John Castaneda, Gomez, Mora, Taylor Lapalus versus Cody Stammen, and then Puja Toma versus Rayan Amanda. We'll just quickly fly through all of these. Ludovic Klein looked pretty good against Thiago Moises. Felt like Thiago Moises gassed a little bit. Klein was mixing up his hands and is wrestling pretty well. We'll stop on Carlos Prates. Just talk me through the madness of that gentleman for all of 4 minutes and 47 seconds of him.
I greatly enjoy this gentleman. Having covered just about every single episode of the Contender Series over its duration, he was one of the people from last year that I was like, okay, we're going to circle this name, because he likes to go out and finish people, and it's not mad bastardry necessarily. It's not wild. He's a madman because he just wants to hurt you with everything, but it's not wild. And he set up and worked to that knee throughout that 4 minutes and 47 seconds, and then landed it perfectly. Then walked outside and had a dart. Then walked outside and fired up a couple of heaters and had to put one out when he found out that he got a performance of the night bonus. That's my kind of dude. As a reformed smoker, as someone that every time he sees somebody having a smoke in a movie and really enjoying it goes, I remember those days. Shouts to Carlos Prates for having a victory dart and getting a $50,000 bonus and burying a knee to the body of Chuck Buffalo.
Just unbelievable altogether. Like, you find spots where knees just crumple people, like absolutely crumple them.
He went down like he was shot.
Oh yeah, it was
lovely. It was lovely. And also at the same time, if you've ever felt that before, even a little bit of it before, you know how instantly your insides feel sour is the best way I can describe it. It just feels like you're instantly going to be sick. It's great to see. He's somebody in this division that we need to continue to pay attention to. He's 31. He has a bunch of experience. He trains with a great team. We're seeing the finishing abilities. Give him a significant step up in competition after this one, just to see. There's no need to progress this along slowly at 31. Let's just find out where he fits and go from there.
I agree. Brad Katona looked fantastic against Jesse Butler. Just a gritty grappling display in round one with not a ton of damage, and then rounds 2 and 3 really started to pour the damage on. Very happy for Brad Katona to cement himself again in the UFC in this sort of second stint in the UFC. I'd like to see him again. With age, you're going to kind of have to push him, but I'd like to see you just get him a little bit of confidence behind him, just a couple of results here and there. Montana De La Rosa and Andrea Lee went to a split decision. Personally, I thought this was a relatively simple 2-1 to Montana De La Rosa. Andrea Lee, I would have been fine with 3-0 Montana De La Rosa, but I can see an argument for Andrea Lee in that first round. It was a close enough round. Rounds 2 and 3 far less close. I'm going to stop on Daniel Marcos. I'm going to give you the floor for Daniel Marcos just because I think we agree exactly on our opinions of him, and you articulated it very well on Twitter, and I'd just like you to echo those thoughts here.
Every time he goes, it's effective. He lands crisp. He has power. It clearly causes damage and hurts guys. We saw him at multiple times back John Castaneda up, and John Castaneda is a good fighter, but he just doesn't go enough. So the thing I said on Saturday and the thing I say both about him in this particular fight and many athletes overall, I think I said it earlier in the show already. You cannot go 30 to 45 seconds where you're just not throwing anything. And that's especially when you are having success. In the moments when you go, you're having success. Now, I'm not saying go crazy, go ham, go out there and just berserker. But if you're having success, fine. Take your 5-second, 10-second reset, go again. 5-second, 10-second reset, go again. This is the sport. You have 5 minutes over 3 potential rounds. You cannot be burning half of a 1 minute. I often think of it in 1 minute increments. That's how I was trained to score fights and judge fights and watch fights. It's the way my brain still works when I watch it. If you're wasting one of those minutes every 5 minutes, you're burning 20% of that round, not doing anything. You're giving your opponent an opportunity to put you in that Andrea Lee position where every time the decision is read, you're making the face of like, what happened? Well, you didn't do enough. So you got to go. He was effective every time he went. Go more. Charles Rosa, you train with him. You're coaching him now. Tell him to go more because he's good. He's very good. He's unbeaten in the UFC, unbeaten overall. Go, 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 go.
It does feel to me that there are two potential, or like lots of potential outcomes, but when I was watching this performance, it felt like there was a potential shade of Leon Edwards here, where he is so happy to be so far ahead, technically, and he is just happy to be like, I'm just going to do whatever I want to do, whenever I need to do it, because I know that I'm not in any danger here. And so I don't need to put my foot on the gas pedal because I don't need to chase anything. This guy is nowhere near as good as me. And so I'm just going to smack him up as soon as I want and whenever I want. And the judges are going to score this fight towards me because he's not going to get close. So there's an element of that, I think, but also an element where it's that reluctance that sits underneath that statement. There was a number of times that he pushes his opponent behind those tram lines, lands some really good shots, and then, as you say, doesn't follow up when you could just continue on that combination, another 2, 3, 4 piece. But either way, I agree with you. A significant step up's needed for the next one. Somebody that will force him into doing that maybe is a good option. So yeah, I
threw out the name Chris Gutierrez. Let's see, right? A guy that will stand in there with you. He's going to hammer that lead leg if you just stand there not throwing anything. The thing you mentioned about Leon Edwards, I think is very apt and a very good comparison. The problem with that, and this is where you have to get away from it, is there are going to be guys that aren't significant, where it's not clear that you're that much better than them, and you can go whenever you need to, and you can land whatever you want to. So don't get yourself in the habit of living that way, of fighting that way, and saying, I can get off when I need to, and I'm going to always be able to do enough. Just go out and do enough. Just go out and stamp it. Take it out of the hands of the judges. Make it to where there's absolutely no question. Now, this fight, certainly, there was no question. This was a clean sweep, rightfully so. If you get a step up after this, it ain't going to be as clear. Some of these dudes, this is the best division in the UFC, in my opinion. And there's a lot of dudes that are going to make nights a lot more difficult than John Castaneda did on Saturday.
Definitely. Denise Gomez versus Eduarda Mora. Mora looked decent in the first round, though I scored the guillotine of Gomez relatively highly. Standing guillotine, Mora definitely had to do some work to get out of that. Then she gassed, and Gomez just took the last 2 rounds. Again, I wouldn't have been super unhappy with a 3-0 Gomez, but certainly a 2-1 Gomez. Again, I don't see how this was a split decision. Taylor Lapalus, Cody Stamann. I thought Taylor Lapalus looked like Taylor Lapalus. Decent on the feet, punished Cody Stamann's rigidity. Cody Stamann unsuccessful in the first 2 rounds with banking those takedowns. The third one managed to get to side control at one point, but Taylor Lapalus scrambled back up pretty well. My question to you on this fight is, one, when are we going to see Taylor Lapalus pushed? Because again, age is not on his side. And 2, what do you think his general ceiling is in this division?
Pushed, I think we see in Paris, because I think he's on that card, and I think he gets a reasonable step up. Because Cody Stamann is a guy that for a long time was ranked and probably lives in that second 15 right now, or is just sliding out of it now as he's lost a couple fights in a row. So I think we see a step up for Paris. Ceiling wise, it's tough, right? Because every time I try to think about where does somebody fit in this division, I look through the roster and I go, all right, that guy's not ranked. All right, that person's not ranked. All right, these guys are like Ferret Basharat and Montel Jackson have a combined, I think, 2 losses in the UFC and something like 8 or 9 wins. And they're both unranked and fighting each other in Riyadh in a couple of weeks. And so, like, if that's what is in the, second 15 or third 15 in the bantamweight division, Taylor Lapalus probably fits somewhere in there. He's a guy that has a lot of experience. I think given matchups, he can probably ascend higher than that. Can he knock on the door of the top 15? Maybe with the right fights, but it's go time. Like it's time to start chasing down one of those fights that gives you the opportunity to show you belong there. Again, I know I mentioned it for Daniel Marcos, but this is where you look at a guy like Chris Gutierrez. This is where you look at a guy like Jonathan Martinez or Kyler Phillips, or even if you want to go the aging, slowing, but tenured veteran Pedro Munoz route, this is where you got to go.
I agree. Opener of the night was Puja Tomar versus Rayan Amada, and Puja Tomar walks away with a split decision win. Fair play to her. Something that Ian and I have started to do is give an overall rating for the card. So to close us out, I'll give mine, you give yours. Please take us away. Be as granular with your rating as you wish.
So are we going like grades? Are we going numbers? What are we doing?
Numbers out of 10, sir.
Numbers out of 10. I would say that this was probably a 6.85.
Okay, that is very interesting. So I was going a 6.9.
Okay.
I went a 6.9 because I feel as though the main card was pretty great, and we had some decent performances from members of the undercard. The split decision wins always slightly take it away from me,
right.
Even though none of them were split decision wins, right?
Right.
And so that sort of is slightly frustrating, and equally the divisional relevance.
And that's the part for me. We had some good performances, but these weren't high stakes fights in terms of divisional ramifications. Certainly they're important fights for every athlete that got to win and every athlete that is now coming off a loss or another loss, as the case may be for some of them. But it's just, this isn't a card where we're getting a lot of divisional movement. And so that is always going to limit how far up that scale I'm going to go. I mean, it's not surprising that you and I are in pretty much lockstep with that, though.
Indeed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. If you have gotten this far, at BJJ_Harry Powell for any form of social media content for me. The man to my left, I guess, you can find him at Spencer Kyte. You can also find him on about 15,000 different sports websites around the universe. We have Fighters Only. We have Sports Illustrated. Sportsnet, sorry. And then what's the third one? Other than the UFC.com, obviously. What's the third one?
No, UFC.com is the other one.
Okay, fine. So we have those three, and you can find him providing all sorts of commentary on fight nights. You can find him on here on the SevereMMA YouTube channel if you wish. And again, we thank you very much. We will chat to you next time.